All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to another installment of LinkedIn Live. Very excited about this topic. I'm here with Joe Norton, the Director of Offering Development here at LMI. Joe, welcome.
Thanks, Adam. Glad to be here.
So let's jump right in. What is your role here at LMI for those who don't know, and what is the Forge?
I'm currently the Director of Offering Development at LMI within our CTO and LMI Research Institute. And really what this is our version of product development for professional services. And the Forge is a technology accelerator or innovation hub that we set up to address the R&D and innovation side of what we do. And that's to develop innovative solutions, rapidly innovate on challenges that we see from our government customers, and really a proving grounds for evaluating larger investments. So as we do these initial prototypes, how do we transition that into larger investments and decision making? And an area that we found this to be useful also is a way for career growth across the company. As people get involved with this, they can explore different career opportunities.
That's great. So, we've had a lot of LinkedIn Lives relating to business transformation. Bettina did the first one, and she mentioned the need for a holistic approach. Where do you see technology accelerators in a holistic business transformation process?
So I really see it as a way to spur innovation, to feed the business transformation process and more geared towards digital transformation, not solely focused on digital, but that is a strong enabler. So it's a vehicle for exploring and trying new digital solutions. It gives organizations an environment to explore and bring about new solutions, and a little bit of a safety net in that there is some room for failure as an opportunity to explore new solutions. And that is a way to sort of spark new ideas, get people comfortable leaning into some of these solutions, to get away from more traditional approaches that we've done, and to really explore how to approach the problems in different ways.
So how do you assess failure? We often hear organizations talking about the ability to fail, to get things wrong, in order to innovate. I think oftentimes that tends to fall on deaf ears, to be honest. Organizations don't want to spend money on failure. So this is sort of a unique approach, unique opportunity within LMI. How do you evaluate when something is not working? How do you adjust? How do you bring in customers or stakeholders to inform that process?
Yeah, we refer to it as failure here, but it's really not failure from our perspective. It's a chance to learn something new and either revector or change our direction on the approach that we've done. So we'll come into prototypes and innovation with a certain perspective and a certain expectation of what the outcome should be. But we're really not afraid of, hey, we learned something new, let's change the direction of that based on what we learned, instead of going on with this for the next few weeks or even months. So it really gives us a chance to take what we've learned and adjust to it very quickly. Part of that is getting direct feedback from customers or users, and those are people we welcome in the process fairly early. It's actually a very important part of our process. Is while we're working R&D and innovation and trying new things, I think feedback from those users to understand what's working and what's not is extremely valuable. So we can respond to those quickly, adjust the things that we work on, and if something is more compelling or more useful or more applicable, then we can make that adjustment very quickly. So failure in our sense is really just any sort of redirection that we can do, and it's really an opportunity to change what we do or learn.
And I guess another piece of that sort of failure analysis is, what is the problem that you're trying to solve with the solution that you're developing? How do you go about picking the problems to solve and choosing the methodology, the software, the tech to solve the problem?
So we've actually got several ways to intake ideas or challenges. They come from employees who are working or supporting customers. They come directly from customers. They'll come internally from our enterprise functions. And then from within the Forge itself, we'll come up with new ideas. In terms of evaluating those, we'll look at just some high-level criteria on whether we should be going after those, and we bake those into the process. So the first two phases of any of this is the innovation phase, where we have a chance to not only come up with the idea, but maybe mature it a little bit in terms of discussing, well, what did you mean by that? This idea? What does this look like? And then the second part is sort of an initial business case analysis. So, okay, this is an innovative idea. Um, do we have good grounds for going in this direction? That could be competitive analysis for other tools or solutions that are in the space. Do we have access to the appropriate data to even to begin to tackle this problem? Are there other opportunities for growth or for expanding the solution into other areas? And then, do we have the resources internally to do that? Or do we have the resources and technology available to begin to tackle this problem? And does it align strategically with kind of where we want our capabilities to go and what the problem is? And then, just being able to scope a clear use case on, okay, this is innovative. We're going after this specific use case. It's going to have this particular application. Once those kind of all align, it's conversations with a lot of different innovators that are involved on whether to go through with this.
And in LMI's case, in the Forge's case, do we have software engineers, front-end developers, human-centered design experts permanently assigned to these projects? Are they matrixed in? How do you manage the talent that actually works on the solution?
So we are a matrix organization. So that's we operate under that operating model. But one of the core pieces of our success is to have dedicated folks that can work on this. It's easy to get distracted on other initiatives. So we need a core team, some part of the team that's focused on this, and this is what they do. And then we will fold in other subject matter experts, different specialty experts to help augment that capability. But a core piece is working within the matrix model to make sure those resources have time and are allowed to focus on this.
And I'm curious, as you move through the production process, if you will, another way to phrase it might be gate reviews. How do you evaluate in a stepwise fashion what to continue to invest in, especially kind of in that mid development process where maybe you have a high fidelity mock-up or prototype? How do you decide what you're going to continue to work on? How do you decide what projects you're gonna stop because you don't think they're going to be successful?
So we've kept the front end of this process pretty flexible. So I'd mentioned a few criteria that we use to evaluate those, and that's what we use to make decisions to do the initial innovation and business case analysis. And we can even go into prototypes fairly quickly. So we'll use those criteria to go into the prototypes, and then the outcome of the prototypes, so the rapid prototyping leadership will involve our markets in terms of where the demand signals are coming from. What challenges are we seeing? Does this help us evaluate other challenges? And if we learn about other products in the space. So all of those go into making that decision. We've kept it fairly lightweight on the front end of this so that we can move quickly. And then once we get into the larger investments, it becomes more of a business case to our senior leadership on whether this is the strategic direction that we want to go to and what the timing is.
Do you bring in outside partners into this? And if so, when and why and how?
Yes, we're solution focused. So we will bring in external partners, strategic partners, venture capital companies, that anything that we think will help come up with the solution. We like to engage those folks. And early on, if appropriate, ideally, we'd like them to engage as part of the process, as part of the working team on day-to-day operations, going in day-to-day meetings, and engage them as part of the team so they can see the full solution. And I think that partnership is what manifests itself in the day-to-day interactions.
I'm curious, what are you most proud of out of the Forge? Whether that's an existing prototype or a finished product. What's something that really demonstrates the full capability of the Forge as a technology accelerator?
Yeah, there are several things we're proud of. I think it's the speed at which we're able to do this. So Last year we did 15 or 20 prototypes, and it's not for the sake of being fast, but it's being able to respond to customer challenges and challenges quickly to get a point of view very early on and evaluate quickly uh, whether it's a direction we should go in. So instead of spending 6 months to a year focused on a problem, we've been able to do that very, very quickly. That's one thing we're proud of. I think the other piece is the collaboration between the different parts of our organizations, because innovation and R&D can sometimes be put within the research organization, but we've pulled in folks from projects, from our markets, and it's been really good to see, because the first week or so of a prototype tends to be a little uncomfortable. People are learning how to communicate and interact, and to see those teams come together and really enjoy working together, I think is a very proud piece of just the culture that we've been able to cultivate. And then in terms of actual outcomes that we've done, in addition to the prototypes, we're starting to build actual products around our logistics capabilities, our data management and analytics capabilities, and then our talent management capabilities. So we have products that are beginning to mature in those three areas.
You mentioned earlier the importance of data. I'm curious your thoughts on the importance of synthetic data, right? So if you're building prototypes to solve a problem that a federal agency is having, how are you able to build that product if you don't have access to actual data from that agency?
Yeah, as we mentioned earlier, this is one of our big criteria for whether to move forward with something is access to data, whether that be synthetic data or um, public data that we can use to demonstrate the capability. That's a huge hurdle. But in terms of synthetic data, we've had to use some level of synthetic data with most of our prototypes, and that's really getting access to fake data that behaves like real data, like, and that's the key piece. This needs to be somewhat comprehensive, realistic, so that it can reflect the use case that we're trying to represent. And there's different ways to get about that. And synthetic data on its own is a whole other area that we could dive into, and is getting a lot of attention recently. But um, synthetic data is a core part of being able to do some of these prototypes, especially when you're dealing with sensitive data from customers. They want to have the confidence that, hey, you're using this data to demonstrate a use case, but you're not exposing any of this to unnecessarily.
Right. Yeah, I heard a talk recently where data scientists were talking about the models that they're using to create the synthetic data. It immediately started to go over my head and outside my area of expertise, but it was really fascinating to see how data scientists, and these are real scientists, are able to build, for example, models of healthcare data that allow folks like you to create software solutions without exposing anyone's personal healthcare data. So it was eye opening to me what we're capable of there. And also, if you could touch briefly, I believe that the Forge is not just working on problems for clients, but we're also using this to solve our own problems, right?
Yeah, we call those customer zero. So uh, when we go after prototypes or participate in these, we have intention of using this on ourselves and leveraging what we learn to improve how we operate. So I'd say two out of the three major investments that we've had, the first users were LMI. So data management and analytics platform to do model operations, data cataloging, that solution. We use that now to drive our logistics and management advisory models and solutions. The other one is a product we call Talent Ignite. So it's really about giving employees resources they need real time to make career decisions. And that's something we hope to deploy internally at LMI. And we're using beta users or user groups within LMI to get feedback on that, as well as customers. So the investments we make are definitely focused on customers and application and industry and markets, but there's tremendous opportunity for us to leverage those internally as well. And it gives us credibility that, hey, we're willing to use these and apply these solutions to ourselves. And there's no reason we wouldn't apply these to other customers.
I think something that that has to be foundational to an organization that invests in something like this is a culture of innovation. Um, what are some tips that you would give to, let's say, a leader in an organization who sees the value in building something like this within their own organization, but maybe doesn't necessarily have the history or culture of innovating in this way? What are some of those core cultural components that you think are important for an organization that maybe wants to launch their own technology accelerator?
I think you touched on it. It's a culture change. So um, I think a group of people that can champion this, can organize around this, and start to demonstrate value early, that you can create prototypes and products that others will be interested, is really important in terms of getting momentum. Because you may have a large culture that's traditionally not, you know, R&D or innovation focused, or maybe they're more operations focused, so they don't have time to think about the innovative side of things. It's really um, getting that small group, get some we call quick wins or some early successes that demonstrate and apply to real practical applications. And slowly you'll start to see the momentum gain. People will get more interested in this because it applies to them. Whereas in some instances, if you don't have that connection to your users in the application side of things, uh, the accelerator, the innovation hub could be seen as like, oh, they work on stuff out there that's not really applicable to what I do. Once you start generating the value and showing how it applies to them and can help shape things that they do, you'll start to change culture. And then you'll start to see gaps in the skill sets that you need to be able to execute some of these. And then you'll start to either change the training for your existing employees or start to recruit new talent to do this. And what you'll see is you'll start to see the momentum gain. So once you start to generate that nexus of momentum, it tends to attract other people within the company.
We're nearing the end of our time. You've said a lot of great stuff. I'd like you to summarize, if you were to advise a senior leader, in the federal government, who's interested in starting one of these technology accelerators, what are the top 3 pieces of advice you would give that leader?
Yeah, I love this question. We've actually come up with 6 or 7 core principles that we operate from. So I'll borrow a little bit from those, but the 3 I'd probably throw out to the audience is: 1, we touched on it earlier, create a team that can focus on this and give them room to execute on this. The context switching and other commitments can erode the quality of innovation a little bit. So really allowing them the freedom and time to dedicate to this is really important. So if you create that structure in that team, make sure they're allowed to focus on it. The other one we've also alluded to is move quickly and embrace failure. So embrace failure, I mean, take those as opportunities to move forward and learn something new, and remove bottlenecks as quickly as possible. So it's really about moving quickly. And it's easy to get stalled on solving complex problems. So you'll have time to dig into those later, but really embrace moving quickly. And it's going to it's going to be uncomfortable in a good way to move quickly, because you're not going to have all the answers to all the questions at the start. And then third piece is to clearly define use cases and applications and stay very connected to the users and stakeholders that will consume or benefit from this. If you can stay connected and keep them involved, let them see what you're working on, let them know how you're prioritizing your backlog, let them feel involved, they'll start to embrace that and find ways to apply what you're generating out of this technology accelerator into what they're doing. And so that's part of the culture change that we had talked about as well.
Fantastic. Well, Joe, this has been a really interesting conversation. I think we're going to end up talking a lot more about the Forge and the things that come out of the Forge in the not too distant future. So I'm sure we'll have you back on. Thank you very much for being a part of this.
Thanks, Adam. Thanks for having me. And I always enjoy talking about this.
Great. All right, everyone. Stay tuned for our next LinkedIn Live next week. We'll put an announcement out on that soon. Until then, have a great rest of your Thursday.